Welcome to this instructional video. We're going to be covering how to build experiments using Qualtrics. We're going to be covering a few topics in this video, so if you're here for something specific, feel free to skip to that part. However, if you're here for the whole journey, well, let's just strap in and do this thing. To start with, you're going to need an account to sign into. To set up an account, you need to contact your brand administrator. If you're unsure who this is, I'd recommend contacting your technician or the IT department first. But once you've got your account, you can just sign right on in. On your first time of logging in, Qualtrics is going to show you their terms and also prompt you to create a project. However, if this isn't your first time logging in, you'll be able to see all the projects you've created listed. You can also kind of change the way they're listed in a way that kind of suits you to find it easier. So we're going to go right ahead and create a project. So we're just going to click over here. We're selecting from Research Core because this tutorial is aimed for psychology students. So we're going to go right ahead and create a blank project. And we're just going to name this Qualtrics video. And then press create. Once you've created your project in Qualtrics, this is the screen that you're going to be greeted with. So in here is going to be where we're going to be building the experiment. As you can imagine, there's lots of different ways to achieve the same result. When I'm building experiments, I like to start with just getting all my content in this software. The fake experiment that we're going to be building today is going to follow the pretty generic format of just having an information sheet, consent form, demographic information, the experiment itself, so the variety of questionnaires that you might be using, and then ending with a debrief. Now, what's important is that each of those concepts is in its own block. Therefore, I'm going to have a block for an information sheet. I'm going to have a block for the consent form, a block for my demographic information, and then we're going to move on to the experimental side of it. So I'm just going to put in here questionnaire 1. We'll have another block for questionnaire 2, and then ending with debrief. So we have a block here for each section. What we're going to do now is just paste in there the information sheet. As you can see on this question here inside the information sheet block, we have the question type of multiple choice selected. Now, we're just going to be presenting information on the information sheet, so we're going to go ahead and change this from multiple choice here to just descriptive text. Get rid of that and then just paste in our information sheet. So with our information sheet pasted, you might think, oh, I don't quite want it to look like that, or, I don't want that font or size, whatever that may be. If you do want to change any of those things, you can just go into the rich content editor here. And you have the choice to change font, size, bold, italicize, anything you want. From this pane as well, you can also insert pictures and videos, as well as insert files for your participants to download and keep. Now that we have our information sheet in there, we can just go ahead and just collapse that down just to make it a bit more tidier. So we're going to move on to our consent form. So we're going to create a new question. Again, we're going to be going with descriptive text, pasting it in there. So we're going to actually have to ask our participants, like, do you want to take part or not? So to do that, we're just going to add a question. And we are going to want multiple choice this time. However, we are only going to need 2 categories. So we're going to ask the question, are you happy to take part? And sometimes Qualtrics will just automatically add some choices for you. So we're just going to take them down. Obviously recommend just using your university's template for the consent form, but you get the idea. They do or don't take part. Now, sometimes for withdrawal purposes, you'll ask your participants to give themselves a nickname. So if we're just going to go ahead and add another question, and instead of multiple choice, we're going to be asking for a text entry. So we're going to ask them to give themselves a nickname so they can withdraw using it. If you're using a nickname for withdrawal purposes, that should all be outlined in your consent and information sheet. But by having this text entry here, it does allow for when a participant does complete the questionnaire, they can just sort of type in an answer there, whatever that may be, and then that will be exported when you collect your data. And now we're going to move down to the demographic information. As standard in psychology, we usually just collect the age and sex of our participants. So that's fairly straightforward to add. And also, we're going to ask for their age. So there's a few ways we can collect age. We can do it on a slider if we wanted to. So they can just sort of slide to whatever their age may be. Or we can just do a text entry again. So the problem we have here with a text entry is that they can just sort of put anything in there. They could just type letters rather than numbers. So we're going to need to change what they can actually put in that box. So we're going to come over here and look at the validation type. So we're going to select content validation. And kind of from content validation, we're going to select number as well. Okay, so we also get an option to have a maximum and minimum number here as well. So most of the time in a typical psychology experiment, we're not really collecting data from anyone under 18. So you could have a minimum age of 18, so no one can pop in an age below that, and a maximum age if you feel so inclined to do so. So if you had any other demographic questions you wanted to ask that were relevant to your kind of study, this might be a good place to put them, or you could plop them in a different block. It's entirely up to you how you want to go about that. Okay, so with our information sheet, consent form, and also our demographic information done, we're going to be turning our attention now to the experimental part, which will be just popping in our questionnaires. So the questionnaires that I'm going to be using for this example is the Maya, which has 37 items, and also the GAD7. There's no particular reason why I'm using these ones, just for the purpose of this. Okay, so we're going to be starting on questionnaire 1, which is the Maya. So we're just going to add a question in here. And at the start of most questionnaires, you'll be seeing this sort of text here, which indicates what participants have to do with the questionnaire. So that is going to be really important to keep hold of. Some of it isn't relevant. Circle one number for each line. Obviously, they're not going to be circling anything because it's all going to be computer-based. So we're just going to be copying this instruction across. So we've got our instruction in there. We're now going to be adding all the questions. So it's just create a new question, copy it across. So on the Maya, it goes from a scale from 0 to 5. So we're going to be changing this to a 6-point scale. Just because it looks nice, we're going to be putting it horizontally as well. And now it's going to come into the point where we want to be changing these labels. To get into the rich content editor on the answers, you can just obviously click this drop down here and get into it this way. So if we look at the difference between those two, pretty similar. Okay, so now we have one question in there. Because of the formatting, it did take a little bit of time. So to save time kind of going onwards, we can just copy this question across. Then all we have to do from now onwards is just paste the question itself. And the formatting of the answer will just remain. So we're going to go ahead and do that for a few of these questions. So we've just added the first 10 questions. For the sake of this tutorial, we're not going to be adding the whole host of them just to save time, but as you can see, there is a lot of questions there. The way Qualtrics will display this block will be all in one sort of sheet, all in one sort of page. So you might not want everything to be displayed all in one big long line so the participant feels like they're constantly going down and down and down. What you could do just to sort of break things up a little bit is to add a page break in there. So what a page break will do is it will mean that the participant has to obviously click to a next page so they're not infinitely scrolling down one large one. Okay. To add a page break, just scroll on down here and select it here. This means to get from this question to this question here, you'll have to press the next button. We're going to go right ahead and go into the preview pane to show you what that looks like. What we should be seeing in the preview is that there should be a page break between I distract myself from sensations of discomfort and when I feel pain or discomfort, I try to power through. So let's go and check that out. Okay, brilliant. So we've got that there. So if we didn't have a page break in here, this page would just keep scrolling until the end of the block and then show the arrow. However, because we put the page break in, we get to see the arrow. So now that we've added all that we want to of the Maya, we're going to turn our attention to adding the GAD7. Instructions go in there. So that's the GAD7 added. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse these down just so it's a bit neater. And the last thing that we have to add is our debrief. And that's quite simple, just paste in there. And close it down for neatness. And then we've got our content down there, really. Obviously, if you're using more than 2 questionnaires, add them. If you're asking anything else, it might fit into the demographic information block, or you might want to make a new block asking those questions. It's up to you. So now that we have all the content down, it's time to start fine-tuning this. An easy thing to overlook is adding the institution that you represent's logo to your questionnaire. So if we're going to add our institute's logo, we're just going to come over here to the Look and Feel tab. Go down here and select Logo, and select Change Image. Currently, it's showing my Qualtrics library, which is just full of memes at this point. So we're going to have to upload the new graphic. So we're going to choose one from my device. So the one we're going to be choosing is here. We can adjust the size here as well. Maybe a little bit bigger. Now we'll save that. And we'll just go ahead and preview this. And now every page will have the university logo. I would recommend putting it a little bit bigger than perhaps what I have. Also, you will note for the rest of the video, this university logo won't appear. That's because I put this section in post because I forgot about it. But enjoy the rest of the video. So let's just go on the preview pane just to see what this looks like. Right, so right now we're on to the consent form. As it currently stands in our project, we don't need to respond to any of these questions to move on and see everything else. So we're going to have to change that. We're going to have to go into our consent form, and we're going to have to force a response here. Let's go and see what that looks like. Okay, so we're skipping past here. Okay, so we have to answer that question. Let's say we do agree to take part. Brilliant. We can go ahead with the rest of it. I'm also going to pop on a force response here as well, just so they have to provide a nickname so they can withdraw. So let's just go ahead and see what that looks like. Okay, so we have to provide a nickname. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm just going to start this again one more time. So again, come into the consent form. I'm going to agree not to take part. However, I can still go on and see the rest of the questionnaire, which is something that we're not wanting to achieve here. One way of getting around this is doing a skip logic. So we can add these down here. So if I do not agree to take part, we can skip to the end of the block or we can skip to the end of the survey. We're going to just select end of the survey for now. We're going to go ahead and preview this. Because we've now added a skip logic, that does mean that nickname will now appear on the next pane. Okay, so we've not agreed to take part and we've gone to the end of the experiment. But for completionist sake, let's just see what happens if we do take part now. So yep, I do agree. And then we've got this nickname on here. So you might want to provide more information in the line of text that I've just got here, just given that the rest of the consent form is on the previous page. Okay, and then we'll go on to the rest of the survey. In addition to skip logics, we also have something called a display logic. So a display logic will display certain questions given the response to another question. I'm going to demonstrate that. I'm going to demonstrate that by creating a new question in demographic information. So I'm going to add a question and I'm going to ask, do you have a pet? The answer to such question obviously will be yes or no. I'm going to add in a question below, do you have a pet, which asks, what pet do you have? And then obviously just going to leave that text entry so they can add in whatever response they want. This question here, what pets do you have, is only relevant if you do have a pet. So we're going to add a display logic. How this display logic works is that if you answer yes to do you have a pet, you will then see this question here. However, if you don't answer yes, so therefore answer no, you will just move on. So for skip and display logics, you'll be using them within the block. So we're going to cover question validation now. And all I mean by question validation is ensuring that people give the response that you want them to give. It's particularly relevant to text entry questions. So if we kind of come over on this pane over here, we can change the character range, length, and actually validation itself of what people can enter in there. So obviously, because I'm asking age, I've just got to allow for numbers in here. And I've also gone further to say that there can't be any numbers below 18. So let's just go and take a look at to see what this looks like. So if I put in there, okay, so please enter a valid number. Okay, so you can see we have to put an age in there. And that's really how you validate questions. Additional validation that you might be interested in knowing about is obviously you've got force response and request to response. Ethically, there is the consideration of should we be forcing participants to answer questions? To get around that, potentially, you might select request to response. So if you go and have a look to see how that looks in preview, it will remind the participants that there is questions unanswered, and then remind them which question it is. So that's quite a nice feature to enable. However, request to response is different to force response because in force response, the participant cannot progress in the questionnaire if you've forced a response. They have to respond to it. Okay, so we've covered the basics about skip logic, display logics, and question validation. So where you should be up to now, if you've followed along, is that all your content should be down and any sort of skip, display, force response, or request response should be enabled on your questions. Now, one thing that you might be kind of thinking about now is, well, I don't always want these questions to be asked in the same order because I don't want to have order effects as a variable that's affecting my data. So the way around how you deal with order effects is randomization. Now, the reason why I state that you should always have each questionnaire in its own block is just to make this randomization process quite nice. Currently, in this block here, we have our instructional statement at the top, followed by other questions. One thing that I am going to add to this is having a second lot of questions after the page break. Just so each page, the participants are reminded of the instructions for the questionnaire. Okay, so now that we've added that, we don't always want these questions to be displayed in the same order, so we're going to go into randomize that. So to randomize within the block, we're just going to go into block options, question randomization. So we get a few preset options here, we can randomize everything. However, that will randomize the instructions as well, which we always want at the top of the page, so that's not any use to us. We can, from this pool, only select a random amount of questions to present. Again, not particularly useful to us. We want to present all the questions in our questionnaire. So we're going to go for the advanced randomization option. So here you will see all your questions. Now, we know this one here and this one here are instructions, so we don't want them to be randomized. However, what we do want are these questions here to be randomized. So if we scroll down, we have 3 options here. Now, of interest of, I'm going to bet most psychology students, is just the randomized questions one. So if we add in the questions that we highlighted before, those are going to be randomized. So those questions can come up in any order. However, the instructions are going to be in the fixed order. So if we just save that, so that's the questionnaire 1 block done. We're going to go ahead and preview this. Okay, so again, we've got the instructions at the top. However, the first question here is, I distract myself from sensations of discomfort, which is different to the question we've got in the fixed order here. So the question asked in the preview is different to the one that is seen first here.
We're going to close that preview down. We're going to do the same for our second questionnaire block. So again, just selecting all these. A useful tip if you perhaps want to select this one and then this one, but not the middle one, is you just hold down Control and select them all individually. But if they just happen to be in a line like this, you can just drag down, pop them in there.
So at this point, we're fairly close to completion, really. However, one thing you might be thinking is, well, hey, if I'm constantly going to be asking the Maya first and the GAD7 second, am I going to run into order effects? Currently, we have a fixed order of the Maya being presented first and the GAD7 being presented second. So what we're going to need to do is counterbalance these questionnaires. To deal with counterbalancing, we're going to be heading up to survey flow. So if you click on this, this is what we're going to be greeted with. So this is where it's really important that you've put everything into separate blocks. So we can change the order of these just by moving them around. But naturally, if you had 2 questionnaires in one block, you don't have this luxury of being able to counterbalance them. You're then going to have to go through the effort of putting them into 2 separate blocks. So it's just easier to just put every questionnaire in its own block, and then that gets around that. What we're trying to achieve here is we want half our participants to have questionnaire 1 first, followed by questionnaire 2, and then the other half of our participation pool to have questionnaire 2 first, then questionnaire 1. Not all our participants will go through the whole thing. Right now, if they don't consent, they're going to be going to the end of the survey, so they're going to miss out on the stuff here. However, if they do consent, they'll just follow on. So we're going to add something below the consent. So these are actually the people that have decided to take part. So we're going to add the randomizer. Okay, and we're going to select to evenly present the items. So within this randomizer, we're going to add some embedded data. So embedded data is something that the participant doesn't actually see and doesn't know that's happening, but it will allow us to be able to counterbalance. So we're going to add the embedded data of condition 1. So pop condition in there and set the value of 1. And then we're going to add another set of embedded data called condition 2. Set the value of 2. So what this randomizer is doing here is when a participant kind of comes through and they've consented, between consent and demographic information, they're going to be assigning them a number, 1 or 2. And then this is going to become important to allow us to be able to counterbalance. So we want everyone to be able to do the demographic information in the order. Typically, most people don't want to counterbalance the demographic information, but if you added a condition 3, you would be able to obviously balance all 3 of these, but we're just going to be counterbalancing questionnaire 1 and 2 for this tutorial, but the principle applies, you just add more embedded data. So we're going to add below a branch, and we're going to add a condition to our branch. So we're going to, on this drop down, select embedded data. So if condition is equal to 1, they're going to see question 1 first and question 2 second. So we're just going to duplicate this. We're going to edit the condition. So if the condition equals 2, they're going to see 2 first, followed by 1. So with this branching function, the participant will sort of come down to the information sheet, consent form being signed, there's some embedded data, either condition 1 or 2. They will see the demographic information, and then it will branch. So if they're assigned condition 2, they will be seeing questionnaire 2 first, then 1. If they're assigned condition 1, they'll see questionnaire 1 first, then followed by questionnaire 2. After they've completed their branch, they will then all come to the debrief at the end. So this is how you would achieve counterbalancing. So we're just going to have a look at to check that our counterbalancing is working in preview. So here we're seeing the Maya first. So we just press restart survey, we should be assigned some different embedded data, and we're going to see the GAD7 on this one, which we do. So brilliant. So we can close our preview. So our counterbalancing is working the way that it should be. So we've used embedded data in a creative way to achieve counterbalancing. However, what we can do as well is we can use it to our advantage for other scenarios, such as if we're wanting to do an intervention-based study. So we're going to be doing a novel intervention-based study just for fun. So what I'm planning to do is if they don't have a pet, I want to show them a video of an animal. And if they have a pet, then I don't want to show them a video of an animal. So we're going to go right ahead and add an animal video here. So what I've done is for the purpose of this, I've just added a YouTube video. I don't recommend doing this for dissertation projects. I would recommend actually having the video itself and uploading the file, just so if it gets taken off YouTube or whatever service you're using to host your video, then you've got a copy of it and you're not reliant on a third party. So we're going to go back into our survey flow, and then we're going to be adding a branch. So this question, do you have a pet? No is selected. Then branch here. And we've set the condition to this branch that if the question, do you have a pet, is answered no, then it will show this video. You might want to liken this branch function similar to the display logic. They are very similar, however, there's scenarios where you would use one over the other. It's up to you to figure out which one is best for your project. So we're just going to preview this just to check that it's working. So we're going to answer no, I don't have a pet. And then we get taken to this YouTube video that we can watch. And then click next. And then we'll go on to the rest of it. And this will still be counterbalanced as well. Now, for some projects, this will be all you need to do to finish your question. A few of you watching might have got all the information you need to be able to build your experiment and just be ready to export it and share it with the world. But before you do that, we're just going to scroll down to the bottom here and select Survey Termination Options. Okay, so from this screen, we're actually going to tick anonymize response. What this means is that no data that potentially could be personally identifying will be collected, such as IP addresses. So make sure you select that and save that. Now you're going to be ready to go ahead and distribute this. Now actually click on the distribution tab, and you can choose how you want to distribute this. The most typical way of distributing a survey, in my experience, is just using the anonymous link. Now, something that I always recommend is to, once you've distributed it, is actually just select it yourself. So this is a live activated survey. So we can just go ahead and just check that it's working the way that you want it to. Okay, so that has collected as if you were a real participant. So with that data collected as if you're a real participant, we can go into data and analysis. So you can go into data analysis and it will load up here. You don't have to wait for that to load to just be able to export your data. So you can export it if you like into Excel. A lot of people just want to export it directly into SPSS. You do you. You can choose whichever one you would like to. One thing that you should definitely be aware of is how your answers are numbered. So if we kind of go into this questionnaire, now you might assume, well, that's 0, so that value never 0 is clearly going to be given the number 0. That's not always the case. So if we kind of come in here and go into recode values, we can see actually that never is assigned 1. This is standard for most Qualtrics, that it will just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can change them and recode them what you like. However, I honestly would recommend just doing that all in SPSS or Excel. At least in Qualtrics, you'll know that that is 1 to 6. Then you haven't got the worry of wondering if you did reverse code or not. And it's just easy if you just know where you are. But you can manage that however you like. You might want to do it all here. Another useful tool is sometimes Qualtrics will just spit out funky numbers. So you might have got yourself a bit confused and just want to reset every question so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. So to do that, you can just reset recode values. Select the second option, so we can come down here and just check that they're as you'd expect. So I always recommend when you've got your survey completed is to distribute it, but just share it with yourself first. Complete it, go into the data analysis tab, go to the effort of exporting it, and just make sure that you can understand what's in this sheet. So just make sure that when you export it and look at this, you can make sense of it and you know what you're doing with this data. There's nothing worse to get into the end of your dissertation project. You export your data and you can make 0 sense of it. So make sure you can do this first. Another good thing to point out is here it will tell you the condition it is. So this relates to the embedded data that we use to do counterbalancing with. So any embedded data will be given the title, what you set it. So make sure that, again, this goes back to understand kind of what you've got in front of you. And if you have activated your survey, you kind of go to your projects window. You should see the active status there. However, if I'm in here changing things, none of those will go live until I publish it again. And now that any changes that I did make would now be live. So for a lot of people, that will be all you need to know. However, for different kinds of design using Qualtrics, there's going to be a few different things that you're going to want to do. So let's say you want to do a time 1, time 2 based study. So you want to take one measurement at one point, and then a few days later, you want to take another measurement. A combination of terminating the survey, redirecting them to a place where they can provide some contact details. I would recommend doing that in a different survey so you haven't got personal information in with the rest of the data. First of all, we're just going to go and create another project just for the purely for the purpose of collecting an email address. Publish this. So we get a link for it. We're just going to copy that link. And we're going to go back to our original questionnaire. So at the end of the survey, we've got survey termination options. We're going to change this so it will redirect to our other survey. Okay, save that. And then make sure we publish this because we've got this live currently. And then we're just going to see what this looks like. So then we're redirected to our email one here. So that's brilliant. So we've got them to complete one questionnaire. It will redirect to another questionnaire where we'll collect their email. You might want to go down the road of emailing them yourself. However, for confidentiality reasons, you might just want an automated email from Qualtrics. So to do that, we're actually going to send an email trigger. So we're going to come down in Tools, go down to Email Trigger. Need this blank, otherwise we'll just be emailing ourselves. And we're going to go from survey question, and then we're going to be taking the choice text value that they provide. So we're going to be copying this, and that's just going to go in there. Okay. You can put it from the researcher. You can provide a reply email. If you don't reply, Qualtrics will reply one for you. You might want to change the subject. Here you could put hi participant, explain the experiment, and then you could set up another project to collect just the time 2 data, insert here the anonymous link, and that's how you would set that up. And then you can collect time 1, collect their email address, which would be completely separate to the research data, send them an email, so it's all automated, so you don't have to worry about it, and then they'll complete time 2. So that's how you would achieve that. So that should pretty much cover the basics of what you're going to need to get started in building your project. There is other features hidden about which may be of use to you, but just have a look, and all the best with creating your projects in Qualtrics.